Hello everybody. Thanks for joining me this evening. I thought this evening maybe look a little more, go a little bit more in depth into some of the people that we meet in everyday life. Sometimes they're hidden in plain sight. Sometimes they're very good at what they do. They're very good at their manipulation and so on. Sometimes what you might see is people who are very, very good at hiding it. People who are very good at appearing to be the good guys, if you know what I mean. I thought it would be interesting to take a little bit of a departure from just looking at narcissism, really, and looking at the cluster B group of personalities, looking at what happens whenever, and it can be common that a lot of the traits in the cluster B group of personalities, whenever they are co occurring together, the sort of people that you might meet, how they behave, how they treat others, how they view others. So, just to begin with, cluster B personalities. It's one of the clusters outlined in the DSM-5, and cluster B personalities are characterized by dramatic and overly emotional, unpredictable, erratic thinking and behaviors. Okay, just to give you a brief outline of the different personality types. First of all, there's antisocial personality disorder. Here we would see things like psychopathy, sociopathy, and so on. But what we see is like a disregard for things like social norms. We see a disregard for rules. There'll be a lot of rule breaking and so on. There's also a disregard for other people's well being, for their rights. So they could be repeatedly breaking the rules, violating the rights of others, and so on, whether that's lying to them, being deceitful, manipulating them, or being very aggressive and intimidating. There can also be impulsivity. They act irresponsibly. They um, can act very impulsive. It's what's on their mind at the moment, what they want. So you don't always see them planning things ahead. They might have an idea. Some might um, very rarely act through on it, but there's really a failure to plan ahead. They would do something, think about the consequences afterwards. So you might meet someone who they're like moving from one partner to the other. They might be moving from one job to the other. They could be irresponsible with their money, even other people's money. There could be a lot of reckless behavior. And as I say, a disregard for things like the consequences. There can also be a lack of remorse. Okay. So you see a callousness here. They can be very cruel. They can also be quite indifferent to the impact of their behavior on other people. They can rationalize it very quickly. Again, don't show a lot of guilt for the impact of the things they do and say. They can be very deceitful. So there's a lot of lying, habitual lying. Sometimes there doesn't seem to be any reason for the lying. Sometimes it can be tactical. Other times they will just lie because they can. They can be very good at conning people. So you see this superficial charms. So they can be very good at conning people for their own personal gain. Okay. They can be very aggressive. Okay. Sometimes they will be violent. They will just, outbursts, swearing, intimidation, things like that. But they can be very hostile. So we see this within the antisocial personality disorder. Then there's borderline personality. And what we see here is this fear of abandonment, okay? Fear of being rejected. So you'll find someone, the frantic efforts to avoid, whether it's real or imagined, abandonment or separation. And this can lead to them sometimes being very clingy, but also being very volatile in their relationships, okay? In fact, a lot of the relationships tend to be unstable. On one hand, they're idealizing people one moment, but they're devaluing, maybe attacking them, criticizing them the next. It's almost like this push pull me with borderline. It's I love you or I hate you, but don't leave me. Okay. And I say the relationships tend to be very erratic, unstable, and they often swing between the extremes of idealizing and criticism and so on. With borderline, you also see an identity disturbance. Okay, so they have a very unstable sense of themselves, and this can lead to sudden changes in their ideas, their goals, the direction they're going in, their values, their long-term plans, their careers, things like that. Um, sometimes it might look whimsical, but it's not really. That would be more like narcissism, if you know what I mean. But they can change direction very, very quickly. Again, just like with the antisocial, we will see impulsivity. So there can be reckless behaviors, there could be substance abuse, things like that, drinking, binge eating, things like that, spending sprees, things like that, maybe gambling as well, whatever. So there can be impulsive behavior there as well. But what you often see is emotional dysregulation and emotional instability. So there can be mood swings. A lot of the time, the reactions to things might seem exaggerated, but they're really over the top. They're not really in proportion to what's going on. Again, it can be the fear of being rejected. They're hurt in that moment. They know they're hurt. They know they're in pain. They can't quite articulate it, and it can sometimes feel like every single person who's ever hurt them, abused them, abandoned them, mistreated them, humiliated them, it all comes out in one go. It comes out at the person that they're attacking, okay? So there's emotional instability. Then we have histrionic personality disorder. And what we see is a lot of excessive attention seeking. Okay. Someone with a histrionic personality can feel very uncomfortable if they are not the center of attention. Okay. So they can behave very dramatically, very provocatively, very seductively, just to get any kind of attention. With histrionic personality, we also see emotional shallowness. Okay. So they could be shifting very quickly between one mood to the other. There'd be a lot of superficial emotions. Again, these swings can be over the top, exaggerated, almost theatrical. It's more like a performance, you know. They can also be very seductive. I mentioned a moment ago about being seductive and provocative, again, in their interactions. One way or another, again, they can be over the top. They can be very seductive, flirting with people, even if they've no intention of going any further with it, or they could be antagonizing. Even in professional settings, they will do this. Again, it's this need for attention. With histrionic, what you commonly find is they will try to be whatever will get them attention, whether that's being overly flirtatious, whether that's being the funniest person in the room, whether that's being angry, whether that's trying to pick an argument or whatever. And if what they're doing isn't working, you will find their approach or even their ideas, their opinions will change very quickly in order to get some kind of attention. Histrionic people, when they're talking, their speech can be very vague. Okay, they could be telling you a story, but there can be far too much detail in one area, but in other areas it lacks detail. They're focusing more on things like style over substance. So the storytelling can be very dramatic, not necessarily telling you what really happened, what the actual story was, but it's very dramatic in how they're telling these things. And sometimes they will dress in ways, style their hair, whatever, to draw attention to themselves through their clothes, their hair, things like that. There's this excessive emphasis on how they look. They're either stunningly drop dead gorgeous or whatever, or they're trying to stick out like a sore thumb. Okay. And lastly, narcissistic personality disorder. And here we see an exaggerated sense of self-importance. There's fantasies of how amazing they are. They have unlimited success and power. They're the most beautiful person you've ever met. They're the funniest person, the most intelligent person. There's a lot of competition with the people around them. And again, just like with histrionic, need for attention, with narcissism, we see a need for admiration. So they're constantly seeking and needing praise, compliments, things like that. Wanting special treatment, thinking they're entitled to special treatment. But we also see a lack of empathy. So there can be an inability or an unwillingness to recognize or even identify with other people, their feelings, their needs, and so on. With narcissism, it's all about themselves. And the relationships tend to be very exploitative. They take advantage of other people. whether to get them status, achieve their personal ends. A lot of their friendships, even their romantic relationships, tend to be very surface level and very superficial. They can also be incredibly envious, arrogance and envious. Often these go together, as well as jealousy as well. Um, they believe others are envious of them or should be envious of them. If other people aren't envious of them, there's either something wrong with them or they're lying. Okay. In reality, they feel envious of others. Okay. Even someone just having a good day at work, okay, that can bring up something in them. Okay. That's something that they weren't responsible for, something they didn't cause, and they can fear that, this person's feeling happy. That's maybe taking something away from me. So you see haughty and often condescending behavior and attitudes towards other people, even those closest to them. And at their very core is this very fragile sense of themselves, very fragile sense of self-esteem. They're very vulnerable to something like criticism. They can be highly resistant to it. They can be overly sensitive to it. Even anything that they would perceive as criticism, not even necessarily a criticism, but even if it's constructive, if you will, that can bring up rage, feelings of humiliation. They feel challenged. They do not like to be challenged. So that's a brief outline of the four personality types you will find in the cluster B. When we're looking at dark personality types, things like the Dark Triad, the Dark Tetrad as well, we often see combinations of these things, specifically narcissism and psychopathy. But what you also find is Machiavellianism, and that's being exploitative, that's being duplicitous, being very, very manipulative, doing whatever it is they want, but believing the end justifies the means, and to hell with the casualties, okay? Because whatever their goal was, whatever their plan was, whatever it is they're wanting, that was the important thing. If you're looking at the Dark Tetrad, there is that also that added element of sadism. Sadism is really just cruelty. Okay, now sadism could be inflicting misery onto other people, whether that's for their own gratification, for their own pleasure, they get a kick out of it, they feel good about it, or they're doing it in order to control. They might not necessarily be getting a kick out of it. It's a means to an end. They terrorize in order to get whatever it is they want. So when you see this combination together, you're going to see someone who believes themselves to be very special. They're entitled to behave the way they want. They will see themselves as the victim or the hero. They're going to be superior. They're going to be treated unfairly, one way or another. There's going to be a lot of attention seeking there, wrapped up in one big ball, whatever it is. But they can be very cruel. They can also be callous. But because of a lack of insight and a lack of self-reflection, they don't see themselves that way. It's everybody else who is at fault. It's everyone else who is wrong. It's everyone else who has hurt them. They are being the good guy or whatever. And again, with that sadism, they can get a twisted sense of satisfaction, either out of hurting others, maybe they're trying to even the score or whatever. So we see a very vindictive side. But they can even take pleasure in seeing other people in distress. Sometimes you might find they are going to become involved, they're going to become the good guy, they're going to rescue and things like that. And they will attack the people they believe have hurt those people in distress. Other times, as I say, they're just going to get a kick out of it. They enjoy seeing people struggle. These people, they can be very manipulative. They can be very sneaky. As I say, they believe the end justifies the means. Sometimes they believe they are on a higher mission because they are superior. They could be more intelligent, believe themselves to be more intelligent, morally superior, things like that. And the things they do, again, going to the antisocial side, the things they do, they're just right to do it. They are justified to do it. The rules don't apply to them, which is why they it generally doesn't go well whenever they get caught, out, or whenever they get held accountable. Okay. They're also emotionally dysregulated, and their reactions, as I mentioned earlier, are way out of proportion to whatever it is that's happening. Okay, so we often see outrage, temper tantrums. We will sometimes see screaming, rolling about the floor, kicking their legs in the air. We will see intimidation, threats, things like that, until they get their own way. Now, thing is, we don't just meet people like this in our one-to-one relationships, okay? We're going to meet them in the workplace. We're going to meet them in the little groups we join. We're going to meet them in communities. We might be living next door to them. They may have been in our family of origin, even. We're going to see them everywhere. A lot of times, I suppose we see this kind of behavior on social media as well. And I think sometimes that detachment, that being able to hide behind a keyboard and a screen, can sometimes bring that out in people like this. But whenever they get involved in something, doesn't matter what it is, it could be a relationship with someone, it could be a friendship, it could be the workplace, they get a job. But whenever they get involved in something, they tend to ruin things from the inside. They will ruin that harmony with the other people. It's a very destructive kind of combination of things. So they ruin things from the inside. They ruin groups, they ruin workplaces. If they can't do that, if they can't get into that group, or they can't join that place, or maybe they've been fired or whatever, because of that vindictiveness, what you find is they often try to destroy it from the outside. If they can't destroy it from the inside, they will try to destroy it from the outside. But again, they don't necessarily see themselves as the bad guy. I don't believe for one second any of these people would be saying to themselves, yeah, by the way, I'm a malignant narcissist, or I'm the bad guy here. What they do is they find a way to justify their own destructive nature. You hurt me, you rejected me, that makes you bad. I'm on the side of good, or whatever. And a lot of them can be totally convinced that what they believe is true, that they are the good guy, that the other people are the villains. Even if they have been caught doing something, the other people are the villains for catching them. Okay. What you commonly find as well is if they don't have one already, they're probably going to find some kind of a belief system, a group of some kind, other like-minded people or whatever, something that's going to validate and justify their own impulsive and often destructive nature. And if they find a group, something like a cult or a cult-like movement, they'll try to present it maybe as some kind of a moral virtue, okay? And this gives them free rein to be cruel and treat others any way they want, treat them disgracefully. Again, when they're in a group of like-minded people that maybe cheer them on, again, that fuels them, that validates them, believing that they are right. And it often fuels your behavior. You'll see them sometimes ramp it up a gear. They will be doing more because of the validation they're getting. And within that little group, yeah, they're all going to be validating and supporting each other. Okay. Now, in positions of power, let's say in a workplace, somebody gets the role of a manager, job of a manager, supervisor, or something like that. What you might find is people with these traits all combined, they don't necessarily get a sense of satisfaction from their position or the level of responsibility or even their accomplishments. What they do is they get the satisfaction through the things they get away with. Okay, it's like because they're very manipulative, because of that lust for power and so on, it's almost like everything is a scheme, everything is a scam, and it's what they can get away with. Okay, not necessarily doing things by the rule book or whatever. It's what they can get away with. And they also get a sense of elation knowing that others might fear them, such as juniors in the workplace, subordinates at work. They will get a feeling of power knowing that people fear them, that they can get away with things. So people are afraid to stand up to them. And in those positions of power and responsibility, what you find is things start to fall apart, things get ruined. But the more things start to fall apart and things get ruined, it's got nothing to do with them. It's the horrible, nasty staff that won't do their job properly and things like that. Never anything to do with them. So, quick break. Waffles for a bit, so I'm going to take a quick drink to clear my throat. Okay. So, when you see these combinations combined, by the way, I should say they'll be combined to different degrees in different situations and with different people. You might have very strong narcissistic traits in one person, very strong borderline or antisocial traits in another. And even then, sometimes it could be situational. I also think it's fair to point out that we're not always talking about a personality disorder. Okay. Someone would have to meet a threshold in order to get a disorder. But what you might find is you're going to have very deeply ingrained traits from the different personality types. Okay. So, where was I? Where did I get to? What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So, how do these people function? What is it's going on with them internally? Well, sometimes what you will find it's almost infant-like in the sense that they're going to split things into simple dichotomies of either good or bad, right or wrong, left or right, up or down, or whatever it is. It's one or the other. So they will struggle with things like a context or a nuance. It's like someone cannot have a good idea about this and be right, but be wrong about that. Um, it either has to be one or the other. Good people do good things, bad people do bad things. Okay. That's a lot of the time what you're looking at. If something suits them, elevates them, elates them somehow, then that is good. But something that might disturb them, distress them, even just something like a simple a simple disagreement, or even the word no, well, that is now bad. Okay. Like I say, there's no context. And the people that they're arguing with, there's no excuses. You are now bad. I have now seen you as bad. If they saw that person as good previously, they might even feel as if they've actually been betrayed somehow. Okay. So if anyone upsets them, that's the thing as well when it looking at that dichotomy. If someone does upset them somehow, no matter how much they might apologize for it, even if they were genuinely wrong, if they apologize for it, if they try to make up for it, the wound stays. And a lot of the time, the apology only reinforces their belief that that person is bad and they are justified to punish them any way they see fit. And the thing about the punishment is what you often find is it's not just enough to maybe get even or whatever. That person has to be annihilated somehow. What they also don't see, again, going back to the lack of insight and so on, they don't necessarily see their own capacity for things like badness, bad behavior, hatred, destructiveness, because it's other people who are bad. Everything gets projected outwards, especially those who don't give them what they want, who maybe call them out, things like that. Instead of accepting that maybe they get things wrong from time to time, instead they project their own badness onto other people, onto one person in particular, or maybe a group of people. They are now seen as bad. They are now seen as the enemy. Okay. And here we would see both splitting, I guess, splitting and projection. So there's the splitting of it's either good or it's bad. And then there's the projection of all the bad stuff, their own bad stuff gets projected out onto their opponent or their enemy or whatever. It's like I say, they can feel fully justified unleashing that bitterness, that vindictiveness onto someone or something. That is now the enemy, must be destroyed. They will not rest, whatever, and they will hold grudges, sometimes for decades. Okay. Now, here's the thing as well. I mentioned a moment ago that if someone maybe apologizes in their mind, they've just admitted guilt. Okay, so they're worthy of the vitriol that comes out. But if someone stands up to them, or even just reacts angrily to the provocation, maybe even just is being assertive or whatever. Well, in their mind, that is now evidence as well of how hateful that person is. And again, they feel justified in attacking either further. And this is what you would call projective identification. So if you look at it this way, I attacked you and that made you mad, and you reacted to that attack. Well, that now proves that you were bad in the first place. So I'm going to have to attack you more. That's sometimes the sort of low level infantile kind of thinking we see here. It also contributes to the lack of responsibility and accountability that they take for themselves. Everything is everybody else's fault. So when you're looking at some of those defense mechanisms that I mentioned, it's very hard to get through those. And this is one of the reasons why they can be very, very difficult to reason with. What you often find is those dark personality types are not interested in facts. They're not interested in evidence. If you were to prove your innocence, if you were to prove you were right, if you were able to prove that you were wrong, you will find it shifts very, very quickly. They will try to rewrite the laws of physics if they can, okay? Quantum mechanics, dimensional engineering. They will rewrite everything to not be wrong, to put you in the role of villain and to not take any responsibility. If they see you struggling, if they are seeing you as the enemy and they are seeing you as struggling, you're having a hard time, that is going to give them a sense of satisfaction. But because of that sadistic element within the Dark Tetrad, not only are they going to enjoy your struggling, your suffering, they'll try to make it harder if they can. Okay? They will do whatever they can to make you suffer. Again, that sense of I'm entitled to do this because I was wounded, I was caught out, or whatever. What you find as well is they will have a lot of different tactics. And people talk about this in narcissism videos. I've talked about it myself. Things like blame shifting, gaslighting, intimidation, threats, manipulation, a lot of different stuff going on. When their tactics fail, they're angry with you for not falling for their tactics. Okay, they're not angry that necessarily you've done something bad or you're a horrible person. Yeah, they're going to see you that way, but they're more angry you're not doing what you're supposed to do because their tactics get them what they want. Their tactics have worked up until now. They work with other people. They might have worked with you in the past, but their tactics aren't working now. And they get very angry with you for not, because they're not working. There is something wrong with you. Okay, you're not falling for them. Again, you see the lack of responsibility and you see the lack of insight. So they tell you a lie, the lie doesn't work. They're not angry because they've been caught out lying or whatever. They're angry because you didn't believe the lie. And again, that's going to justify their vitriol. So just on that, probably wouldn't do any harm looking at some more of the defense mechanisms that make them very difficult to reason with. Okay. So there's going to be this sense of maybe omnipotence. Nearly got that right. Nearly got that word right. Okay. So they believe, even insist, that they have and should have power over other people. Remember the sense of entitlement and superiority. They have power over circumstances, other people's choices, decisions, things like that. What they want, how they feel, their desires rather than their needs, even their preferences override reality in some cases. Even if what they want is going to cost other people a lot of stuff, well, that doesn't really matter to them. Okay. It's all about them. With other people, you will find them, again, dominating, controlling, even other people's behavior, how they dress sometimes, the things they say, the language they use, and so on. Even trying to manage other people's thoughts. How many times have you met someone who would accuse you of thinking something? Okay. I don't know, you could have been eating a piece of toast and they suddenly tell you you're thinking about someone else. They believe they have control over people's thoughts. In fact, in some cases, you should be thinking their thoughts. You should be thinking the same things as them. You should see everything from their perception instead of your own. So there is that sense of omnipotence. Okay. The most common one I think you're going to find is denial. And that's just refusal to acknowledge or accept reality if it doesn't fit their version of things. When they're caught out with something, even if a dozen people saw them, watched them doing it, no, they're still going to deny it somehow. What you find with these dark personality types as well is there's a lot of devaluation and dehumanizing of other people. They can denigrate, dismiss other people. They see them as being of less importance, less value, things like that. And that can even be those closest to them, their partners, could be their own kids, work colleagues, their families, things like that. Not just people they perceive as being somehow against them. There is something else. I'm just trying to find the word for it. I'm trying to find a term for it. It's like they believe that whatever suffering they've been through, okay, makes them important. It makes them virtuous. It gives them a moral immunity to the things that they're doing. They've been so badly victimized. Now, they might have just been told no for something, or again, they might have been caught out lying or whatever, but suddenly they're the victim. And they believe that this sense of victimhood gives them the right to do whatever it is they want in order to, again, even that score or whatever, get their own back, when really they're just being vindictive and vitriolic. Transference is another thing they do. They respond to other people as if it's responding to someone from their own past. I mentioned earlier on, when there's a lot of pain, whenever they're feeling pain, they might not necessarily know what it is, and it all comes out. It comes out sometimes like emotional vomit. There's a lot of shouting, a lot of screaming, a lot of threats. They could be feeling a lot of pain. Again, not able to regulate the pain, give it a name, and so on. It's like every single person who's ever hurt them, rejected them, humiliated them, things like that, is all rolled up into one ball and it's dumped onto you or whoever it is they're screaming at. Okay, so there can be transference. As if it's someone from their past or other people from their past. The person in front of them is now taking all of that anger. You often see a false self as well. It's a very fake persona. It's an identity that they create themselves to get them what they want, to keep their fragile self-esteem safe. It's something that they're hoping is going to get them approval, sympathy, whatever from other people. Sometimes it is used to just get a foot in the door, things like that. Other times it is used to manipulate and exploit others. But really, what's there is fake. And it's sometimes at its lowest level. You like a particular kind of music, they're going to tell you they like the same music as well. It's just trying to get that foot in the door. Other times they will be looking around, what kind of person do these people like? Well, they like someone who's funny, they like someone who's brave, they like someone who is very noble or whatever, and they're going to try to morph into that. Okay, so it's a very false self in order to meet other people's expectations and get approval from them or get their foot in the door somehow. Okay. Let's see, what else do we see with that personality type? Reaction formation, something I talked about a while ago, and this often involves they mask what they're really thinking and what they're really feeling, and they might do the opposite, sometimes to an exaggerated degree. For instance, in a workplace, there could be a manager there that they really despise. They envy them. They want to take their job. They don't think they deserve to be in that role. But because this person's superior and this person could help them up that corporate ladder, what you will see is this exaggerated friendship, this outrageous laughing at the most banal of jokes or whatever. So they are behaving in a way that isn't true to how they're really feeling. Okay. Sometimes they will do it. You will see this on social media, people typing stuff out, people talking at different events and so on. They could be talking at a wedding about how amazing this, that, and the other is. Really, what they're trying to do is they're just trying to get some kind of maybe virtue points or whatever, just to try to gain favor with their audience or to gain favor with whoever it is they are trying to manipulate. What you will find in this as well, I mentioned it earlier, it's just come back into my head, is intense envy. Very common in narcissism, but it can spread across that dark personality type. It's a very destructive envy, okay? It's not an inspirational envy. Hey, I'd like to be more like that. It's a very destructive envy. If I can't have it, I will destroy it. I don't want you having it. Or the fact that you have it at all. I don't want you having anything like that. It's a very destructive envy. So if I cannot have it, it shouldn't be allowed to exist. Things like that. Okay. And lastly, I suppose, why do they behave like this? The way they get on, even when things blow up in their face. I think they largely do it because the majority of the time it works for them. Okay. They do what they do because in a lot of situations it works for them. It gets them out of trouble. It gets them access to people, people with status. It gets them power. It gets them control over other people. They do what they do because it largely works for them. It's when it doesn't work for them. As I mentioned earlier, they get angry with you. They get angry with the other people, the people it doesn't work with, rather than just reflect and think, do you know what? Maybe I need to change my approach here. Okay. A little bit of honesty or whatever. So that is the dark personality types. It's the Dark Tetrad, which is, as I mentioned earlier, it's usually psychopathy, which is really the antisocial stuff. It's the narcissism. It's the Machiavellianism, which is being very manipulative, and it's the sadism. But you often see in that cluster B the histrionic, the over-the-top performances. You see the borderline, the out of proportion reactions to things, and that fear of being told no, that fear of abandonment. You also see the antisocial side, the callousness, and you see the entitlement and the haughtiness and the grandiosity of narcissism. When those things are combined, it's not a pleasant combination. It's not a nice person to be on the wrong end of. So I hope you find this interesting. I am going to go to questions now and take any questions if I can find the little button that makes the box lift out. So let's go back to the beginning. And remember, if you have any questions, please, a little question mark makes it a lot easier for me to find. Otherwise, I'm jumping into people's conversations and so on. Let me see. Where do we get to? Cohorts. Do not. Okay, I'm going through people's conversations here, but I really don't want to jump in. I would like to find a question if I have one. Oh, well, here's something here, because Jane Smith has just said it's not a question, but it's a point. I think it's a good one. It's in response to Dr. Suzanne. She says her body knew before she did, increasingly terrified for no reason, 2-3 years before I finally got out. There is something in that. We do get visceral reactions. We do get physical reactions to things. I think if you were to look at it like someone being in a constant state of anxiety, they're in a constant state of fight or flight, they're constantly fearing something going wrong, some kind of attack, whatever it is. So they're in a constant state of alert. So they keep getting these rushes of adrenaline whenever there's some kind of perceived danger and so on. In long term situations, stressful environments, and so on, it's like our body is flooded with cortisol. And that's not a healthy place to be. We do start to feel these things physically. We're wondering why our diet's disrupted, our sleep's disrupted, we have aches and pains. We're wondering why we're shallow breathing, we're gasping for breath sometimes, we've got constant headaches. And it's because we're in that constant state of alertness. So there is something in that, Jane, about your body knew before you did. It's we feel this constant fatigue sometimes because of that hyper state of alert. And sometimes it's only when we come out of those situations we realize how truly fatigued and tired we really are. So let me get to Sean Ixt, if I've pronounced your name right. Astonishing how they can just filter out reality and just accept what they want. I might get into trouble for saying this sometimes, but it's true. It's true. Our feelings, no matter how strong they are, our feelings, and how honest they are as well, by the way, sometimes, our feelings are not always an accurate reflection of reality. Okay? For instance, we could feel intense fear, and yet we're all alone. There's no one and nothing around for 100 miles. We're perfectly safe, but we can feel uneasy. Okay? So, as honest as our feelings are, they're not always an accurate reflection of reality. To go with that, reality does not have a vested interest in how you feel about it. Reality does not change regardless of how you feel about it. So sometimes we think of those two things together. Sometimes we're dealing with people who, reality is bad. How dare you? This is my perception. This is why I think it should be. We get to again looking for. Again, I'm getting lots of conversation from folk, which is good. I do like you all talking with each other. That's good. But again, if I see something with a question mark, I will know it's aimed at me. Okay. Dr. Susanna saying the envy is so intense. It is very intense, but it's also very infantile. It's a strange kind of envy. It's not just envy because you drive some luxury car that costs more than some people's houses, and they're driving something about 15, 20 years old that's fallen apart. It's not that kind of envy. It's the envy that, as I say, even you just have a good day. You had a good day at work. Someone complimented you. Someone gave you a bit of praise, said, thank you, good job, well done. That brings up, it's incredible what that brings up in them. Jealousy and envy, particularly with narcissism, it often goes hand in hand. Envy is what we feel when we see someone with something we don't have or can do something we can't. Jealousy is what we feel whenever we fear someone's going to take something from us or someone from us. With narcissism, you often see these both going together. So you had that good day at work, and it doesn't matter whether they had a good day or not. They could have had a far better day than you, but just the fact that you had a good day at all, they fear that that's taking something from them. That's disempowering them somehow. You're rubbing their nose in it or whatever. That's why so many people that have been in relationships and situations and environments with people like that, they learn to keep very quiet. They don't want to talk about the bad stuff that's happened because they're going to get a lot of scorn and ridicule and they're going to get poked with a stick and all the rest of it. But they don't want to talk about the good stuff either because they're going to be met with such intense envy and bitterness. it's no way to live. Human beings can't really live like that. We like to share things. We like to share good stuff as well as bad stuff. With that kind of personality type, unless they're in control of it, they don't want to know. They feel that something's being taken from them. You're doing something deliberately. Strange stuff. Sandra Thomas says the Bible calls it wickedness. If you could sum it up in one word, I think wickedness is a pretty damn good word. So thank you for that, Sandra. Where do you get to? Oh, just had a big massive jump there, so I don't know where I was. Soul Traveler, someone mentioned cults. These Dark Tetrad types seem to hold power inside family cults. What you find is anything that dark personality types get involved with does become very cult-like. You generally find cult leaders are dark personality types, and one of the, I wouldn't say the best example, but the only example I would know of would be Keith Raniere from the NXIVM cult. If you ever listen or watch Mark Vicente, listen to his stuff, he talks a lot about being in that cult. When I was talking to him, when I interviewed him on my channel about how these people operate and how beguiling they can be. But when these people get into a workplace, and let's imagine it doesn't even have to be senior management, it could even just be, junior level. What you often find is it starts to become like a cult. They create a them versus us kind of environment. You find this in families as well. Everybody else is out to get us, and we have to keep the family, strong and noble and all the rest of it. That aunt and uncle that no one has seen for years, they're horrible, bad people, and it's only because maybe one Christmas there was a disagreement over something. So there's a lot of them versus us to create division, to create conflict. A lot of these people thrive on conflict, but they also present themselves as if they have the answer. Okay, whatever it is you're missing, whatever it is you're lacking, they can give it to you. They can keep you safe. They can give you a sense of identity. They can help you climb that corporate ladder. They will keep you safe from that horrible other boss or that, other group over there, that other department, whatever it is. And when it becomes cult-like, it isn't long until these things start to collapse in on themselves. Yeah, and this is the thing about a cult as well. A cult is something that you're not allowed to leave. Okay, when people do try to leave, whether it's that family, whether it's that relationship, whether it's that workplace, whether it's that cult, yeah, you see the treatment suddenly change. How they treat you suddenly change. You now become othered. You now become the bad person. You now become the traitor, like one of the enemy or whatever. Even if you find in these little online groups and people are talking about I don't know, whatever it is they're going through, they're talking about anything. They'd be talking about politics, they'd be talking about their relationships, they could be talking about anything. And there is this kind of intellectual homogeneity. But then somebody says, well, actually, had a good weekend this weekend. I was pain free, or we went on a really good date and it worked out well. Now all of a sudden they're going against the group narrative and they start to get attacked. Okay. Again, it's that cult like thinking, and behind it, you often find dark personality types. So here's a question from PB. Why do narcissists spend their lifetime trying to reestablish control after you totally break free from their abuse? My apathy towards my ex-wife infuriates her more than anything else. I can give you an answer. I can give you the answer. There's never a one size fits all. If you're in some kind of dynamic with someone with narcissism, very strong, deeply ingrained narcissistic traits, You were a supply to them, okay? Every reaction fed them, whether it was a positive one, whether it was a negative one. As much as they want your admiration and your envy, if they can't get that, they will take your bitterness and your hatred, because they are still in your head. They are still living rent free in your head. So they will take any reaction. When we meet something with indifference or apathy or whatever it is, they are not being fed. And what that can bring up is rage, because that's really unfair. It's not that it's not that you've moved on. It's not that you don't really care, you don't particularly want anything bad to happen, but you don't really care if anything good happens. You're just indifferent. That's not feeding them. Okay? They're not getting their supply. Narcissistic people fear being irrelevant, not mattering, not really caring. Now, I don't know what was going on with your ex-wife. You say she was narcissistic. I don't know her, so I can't say that she was, but I'm just being very general. Narcissistic people can become very angry if just like I mentioned earlier, their normal tactics don't get them what they want. So if you're no longer that supply and they were so used to you being the supply, remember they will take bad attention rather than none at all. If they're not getting any whatsoever, other than maybe one word answers, responses, or sticking to the facts, things like that. Yeah, of course, that's going to rub them up the wrong way. So where did we get to? Name, what about comorbidities like depression and anxiety in the Dark Tetrad? What happens when those comorbidities are gone? I'm not sure what you mean by gone. When the anxiety and the depression goes? When that's gone? Low mood and anxiety often go hand in hand. Long term, it's very hard not to feel one without the other. We can feel them situationally in short bursts appropriate to whatever's going on, the situation that we're in, or whatever it is we're facing. Long term, we would be feeling them both together. I think with dark personality types, there is an anxiety, yeah. Sometimes an anxiety of you not seeing them special enough, not giving them what they want. Maybe they're going to lose control over you or whatever. That's going to come out. That's going to manifest in different ways. The low mood can be what would be known as a narcissistic collapse, maybe. They're feeling deflated, maybe defeated, and things like that. But whenever you say they're gone, bear in mind that things like anxiety and low mood can be normal for a lot of people in a lot of situations. That could be a normal response to something. It could be feeling tired. It could be feeling hopeless in a certain situation. It could be feeling uncertain. Okay. But they are situational and we feel them in short bursts and they come and go. Okay. Depending on what we're facing. We could feel anxious, for instance, applying for a job, and we're going for the job interview. So we're going to feel a level of anxiety. We're hoping we get the job, but there's no guarantee. And there could be a fear that we're not going to answer the questions properly. If we didn't get the job, our mood might lower a bit. Okay. So that's what I mean by they can be situational. And what you often find is they pass quickly. Because maybe we apply for another job, maybe we're successful that time. So they can be situational and they're going to come and go depending on what's going on. Big Hug Love Bug says, I'm new here, folks. Do these live streams happen regularly? Yes, they do. They happen every Sunday at 8:30. Okay. So let me see. Carl says black or white thinking. Now, and whole object relations or object constancy. Yeah, it is very much black or white thinking. It's all or nothing thinking. Which is why I said that even sometimes you'll find someone might do or say something that upsets them. And it might not be that big a deal, but it's really sort of giving them a narcissistic wound. even if they apologize and try to make up for it, that wound doesn't necessarily go away. And what you'll find is for the rest of their days, they're still holding on to that. That's why they keep bringing up the same. What about the time you did this? And what about the time you did that? They keep bringing up. When you see those other things comorbid, like the psychopathy and so on, the antisocial, the borderline, and so on, when you see those things comorbid, even if you were to apologize for something mundane, in their mind, you have just confessed your guilt, okay? Which is why they believe that justifies them to be very vindictive and so on. So where do we get to? Mary Beth says, are there brain scans that can diagnose this? I think so. I think there could well be. To be honest, it's not something I've ever really fully looked into. I don't really look at the science, that side of it. That's way above my pay grade, to be honest, but out of my league. But I do think there are brain scans that can show different things. Maybe there could be things like low mood, depression, heightened anxiety. Like when we are feeling really anxious, the primitive part of our brain, the hippocampus, that becomes very active. Okay, that's why we're getting flooded with things like adrenaline, cortisol, things like that to keep us alert. I'm speculating that a brain scan might be able to see something like that. But other than that, sorry, I can't really answer that. Where do we get to? Oh, it's just jumped again. So if I try to scroll back, okay, DJN says, the moment I discovered the face he makes when he lies, couldn't believe how often he does it without blinking, stuttering. And his Wadsworth's mother and sister did the same. DJN, there is something in that. First of all, there is genetic traits. I suppose there could be something, but there is also learned behavior. And it is interesting. I remember a lot of years ago reading something about poker players. The first couple of games they're playing, they're really playing to try to learn to read the tells of the other players. What do they do when they've got a good hand? What do they do when they're bluffing, and so on? And I think that when you get to know someone over a long period of time, you do get to, even if it's unconsciously, you do get to pick up on some of their tells. That's what you want to call them. So yeah, you could see the look on their face, you could see a twitch, you could see a stare, whatever it is. Sometimes we do pick up on things. Baby is asking, why do narcissists put that abuse on their kids? Daughter had to work through a lot in therapy. Had to slow walk things she realized her mum's abuse. This is the thing. It's, again, all situations are different. And remember, you're dealing with people that don't see themselves as being abusive a lot of the time. They're justified to behave in how they do. It's the other person's fault. Also, I think it isn't always abuse in the sense that there could be neglect in families, narcissistic families. Not that kids are being starved or anything hard like that. But they're not necessarily getting their emotional needs met, things like that. The child might not be celebrated for the things they achieve, for the things they do, unless it's public, unless there's other people around. They could be largely ignored. Other than that, they're fed, clothed, put in the bath, put to bed, things like that. But emotionally, there could be like an emotional neglect. When it comes to the other stuff going on, there's the unkind humor, the cruel humor. There's the holding high expectations and things like that. Not everyone, as I mentioned earlier on, is going to say, you see me, I'm really wicked and I love doing this. I get a twisted kick out of doing this. They're not necessarily going to be doing that. They might believe there's nothing wrong with what they do. Who knows? They might have been treated like that. So it's a hard one to answer why they abuse their kids. Sometimes it is a power thing. Sometimes it is just more neglect. Sometimes it is about control, dominance, and things like that. There could be a lot of different things going on. So it's never really a one size fits all answer, but there are some possibilities. Oh, just had a big jump there. So we're get to. There we go. So, right, it looks like I'm coming towards the end. Because I don't see any more questions. But anyway, yeah, I used to hope it was an interesting topic for you. Looking at how those things are. Remember, the callous disregard for other people, okay? The lack of remorse, the sense of entitlement, the belief they're special and deserving of special treatment. There's the emotional dysregulation and the fear of things like rejection and abandonment. And there's also a lot of attention seeking behavior. Okay. When you look at those things co occurring with things like manipulation, manipulative behaviors, and sadism, okay, it's a scary topic, but I thought it'd be interesting. I hope you find it interesting. Oh, very happy Mondays. Thank you very much. That is very kind of you. Freud and I shall be enjoying sausages this week. So yeah, this week I am back again. Conversation video going out. I am going to be looking at. It was supposed to go out last week. I'm going to be looking at the long-term effect of narcissistic abuse. I mentioned it earlier about being flooded with things like cortisol. I'm going to be looking at that and how that feeds into the trauma bonds, how some people are led to believe, which is why sometimes we either keep going back, we keep getting other chances, giving other chances, or even after the relationship has ended, we are sometimes replaying situations in our heads like we're trying to get a new piece of information. Because on one hand, we are flooded with cortisol and we are in a constant state of alert. But on the other hand, we are looking for a little bit of dopamine, something to relieve the tension, relieve the pain. Okay, so that's going to be my video this week. Dr. Suzanne, thank you very much. Great topic. Thank you. It's good. I'm glad you liked it. Again, Freud and I shall be enjoying tons of sausages this week. Very happy Monday says Freud is adorable. Oh, I did not see your last question. Type it very quickly and I will get to it. So I don't think I got to see it. Oh, I have found it, yes. Adult children of these types of narcs may display behaviors learned by their caregivers and not be narcs themselves. Have any ideas or suggestions for non-narcissistic people to recognize and adjust? Again, speculation on my part. Sometimes we learn behaviors because they become normalized. But then we meet other people and those behaviors are not normalized. We meet other people, we realize we don't necessarily have to be defensive. We don't necessarily have to lie. We don't necessarily have to people please. They can be accepting of us. They could be asking us, asking us questions because they're genuinely interested, not to try and catch us out. We could meet people who they want to bring out the best in us and they don't feel threatened about it. So one way or another, someone can learn behaviors and those behaviors may have worked in some situations, but then they meet someone or they meet some people, they meet a group of people. And what they see is just maybe something like common decency. They see reason. They see people who understand reality. They see people who can be quite forgiving. They're not vitriolic. They're not always criticizing. They're not always trying to pick a fight. And over a period of time, what you might find is people start to adjust. Sometimes it can be the environment that we're in can help us to heal. I always say the antidote to toxic people are decent people. It sounds simplistic, I know, but it is true. Good people, nice people, not people who are going to agree with every word you say, not people who are never going to argue with you, not people who are going to, just people please and worship you and so on. But people who can disagree with you and still be kind, still be decent, still go for a coffee with you, still talk about last night's movie or football match or whatever. When we start to associate and mix and form healthy relationships with people like that, a lot of our learned behaviors sometimes start to change. Okay. Oh, and Jane says, I'm looking to start a channel and blog about this. I don't even know if I can pronounce that. Would you or someone else, be good to interview for the connection between psychological abuse and chronic illness? That is a really interesting question, and a couple of people do come to mind, but I can't actually remember their names at the moment. Not anyone that I can think of on YouTube. I'm just talking about people I know in my personal life. Um, the psychological abuse and the physical illness. Hmm. Sorry, I get lost in thought. There may be people on, and I always say proceed with caution because you never know who you're going to be talking to. You never know what these people are like. Um, there may be people on different online forums, Facebook pages, things like that, might give advice on certain things. You might find, depending on what they're saying, use your discernment. Um, if they're genuinely interested in helping people, as opposed to just talking about how crap everything in the world is and how you're suffering and so on, people give practical suggestions. I think they're good people to interview. You might find if there's anybody on a chat, anybody has a channel who does works on the medical side of things, maybe a GP, general practitioner, or a doctor or something, who might be able to talk about it. They might give you ideas. Other than that, the only people I know are people I haven't seen for about 15 years, and there were people I knew in my personal life. I don't think they do interviews and so on. But that's a really good idea, actually. The link between abuse and the physical side of things. What's pots and pans and solo traveler? Absolutely amazing. I tell you what, Freud and me are going to be absolutely sausaged out this week. We are going to have a sausage festival. It's going to be Sausage City in this house. Absolutely terrific. Thank you, everybody. That's really kind of you. So as I say, yeah, video this week is going to be looking at the how the brain works when it comes to things like the trauma bonds and trying to break free. I'm going to be back again next Sunday at 8:30. Haven't decided a topic yet. Anybody wants to suggest something during the week, or even if I put the question out, anybody wants me to talk about anything, do let me know. Until then, everybody, look after yourselves, take care, and thanks for joining me again. So, bye all.